On 13th May 2025, Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman stood before a global audience and announced something that jolted markets and signaled a new chapter in US Gulf relations. A $600 billion investment commitment from Saudi Arabia into the United States, forging a decade-long economic partnership. This was not about oil. It was about technology, energy transition, defense manufacturing, data infrastructure, and, most importantly, control over the future. For many years, Saudi Arabia sold barrels. America sold protection. But as the cameras rolled in Riyadh, both nations signaled something new. A partnership anchored not in fossil fuel, but in the promise of diversification and digital capital. To understand why this deal exists, we must rewind nearly half a century. Since the 1970s, the US-Saudi relationship has been defined by a simple equation: oil for arms. Riyadh kept the oil flowing. Washington ensured stability through military and diplomatic backing. It was transactional, but it worked. Then came Vision 2030, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's National Transformation Blueprint. Launched in 2016, it aimed to reduce the kingdom's dependency on oil, foster tourism, build megacities like Neom, and turn Saudi Arabia into a global hub for logistics, energy, and finance. But such transformation needs partners and capital deployment that works beyond domestic borders. Meanwhile, the US, under Trump's return, sought to reassert global economic dominance, rebuild industrial infrastructure, and attract foreign capital amid rising competition from China. So, the $600 billion deal wasn't just opportunistic, it was inevitable. Two nations, each facing an inflection point, realized they could leverage one another to achieve mutually existential goals: Saudi modernization and American re-industrialization. Behind the polished podiums and grand numbers, the partnership is not one single transaction. It's a portfolio of sectoral agreements, strategic investments, and long-term cooperation frameworks. Here's what we know so far. $142 billion in defense and security contracts, including technology transfers to develop domestic Saudi manufacturing capabilities. US defense giants like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon are expected to anchor operations in Riyadh and Jeddah industrial zones, creating tens of thousands of American jobs through supply chain expansion. Over $200 billion earmarked for energy and infrastructure, focused on renewable energy projects, green hydrogen, carbon capture, and smart city infrastructure in both countries. The Saudis are investing in US clean tech startups, while American energy firms are securing contracts in the kingdom's Geiger projects. Roughly $150 billion in tech, AI, and data infrastructure partnerships, Saudi sovereign wealth funds like PIF and Sanabil are allocating capital into Silicon Valley AI labs, semiconductor ventures, and cybersecurity firms, echoing the UAE's Mubadala strategy, but on a larger scale. The remaining $100 billion plus spans logistics, mining, space exploration, and healthcare technology, areas Riyadh is prioritizing to diversify GDP composition. This isn't philanthropy. Every dollar is a strategic investment designed to generate financial return. While for Saudi Arabia, this is about legacy and leverage. Vision 2030 was always more than an economic plan. It was a declaration of intent to shift the kingdom from a rentier oil state into a global investor state. Saudi Arabia wants access to American innovation ecosystems, from AI and aerospace to pharmaceuticals, exposure to dollar-denominated assets and safe haven returns, transfer of know-how and intellectual capital, and a recalibration of global perception, from energy exporter to innovation partner. For the United States, the calculus is different but equally self-interested. It brings foreign capital at a scale few countries can match. It revitalizes industrial capacity, particularly in defense, manufacturing, and infrastructure. It reinforces US geopolitical footing in the Middle East at a time when China's presence there is expanding through the Belt and Road. And perhaps most crucially, it reminds global markets that America remains the world's most desirable investment destination, despite political turbulence and debt ceiling theatrics. At its core, this deal isn't just about economics, it's about psychology. For Riyadh, it's the validation of a narrative long in the making, that Saudi Arabia is no longer a regional dependent, but a global player capable of shaping the world's technological and financial future. For Washington, it's reassurance that despite global fragmentation, it still sits at the top of the world's investment pyramid. But behind the symbolism lies tension. This partnership arrives in an era defined by moral scrutiny. Western institutions and activists still question Saudi Arabia's human rights record, freedom metrics, and autocratic governance. Yet, as seen before with China or Qatar, capital often trumps conscience. The global economy rewards efficiency and ambition, not always morality. So, while critics call the deal a soft power whitewash, supporters view it as strategic realism, a marriage of necessity in a world where economic interdependence is the new diplomacy. If the 20th century Saudi-US story was about oil and arms, the 21st century version will be about data and influence. Here's how this partnership could reshape global dynamics by 2035. A. Saudi Arabia as a global investor state. By 2030, PIF is projected to manage over $2 trillion in assets, making it one of the world's top 3 sovereign wealth funds. Much of that capital will flow into Western equities, venture capital, and infrastructure. If even half of the $600 billion pipeline is deployed efficiently, Saudi Arabia could become the largest Middle Eastern shareholder in US private equity and tech ecosystems, rivaling Singapore's Temasek or Norway's government pension fund. B. US defense and manufacturing renaissance. Arms deals alone won't define the decade. The localization of supply chains will. Expect a rise in Saudi-funded defense plants in US states like Texas, Alabama, and Arizona, politically strategic regions that benefit both Trump's reindustrialization agenda and Riyadh's desire for embedded influence. C. The green energy crossbridge. Both nations share a strange paradox. One dominated by oil, the other racing toward renewables. Yet, the overlap works. American firms gain long-term export markets for hydrogen and carbon capture tech, while Saudi Arabia gains credibility in its net zero by 2060 campaign. D. Data as the new oil. The most overlooked dimension is digital infrastructure. Saudi-US joint ventures in AI research, cloud computing, and cybersecurity could make Riyadh a digital hub linking Asia, Africa, and Europe, positioning the kingdom as a data transit and storage powerhouse. If successful, Saudi Arabia could control critical nodes in global data supply chains, much like oil pipelines once dictated geopolitical leverage. Every grand alliance comes with fragility. The deal's success depends not on signatures, but execution. And the track record of large-scale MOUs turning into tangible projects is mixed. Here are the main risks. Implementation lag. Many of the announced projects are intent-based, not contractual. Without transparency, much of that $600 billion could remain paper-bound. Public perception. Human rights controversies, like the Khashoggi aftermath or women's rights restrictions, may resurface, testing Washington's moral positioning. geopolitical balancing. As Saudi Arabia deepens ties with both China and the US, it risks playing a delicate balancing act that could trigger strategic suspicion on both sides. Economic volatility. Oil revenues still fund most Saudi investments. A drop in global prices could constrict its outbound investment capacity, stalling momentum. And finally, political uncertainty. Both Trump's and MBS's leadership styles are bold but volatile. Any shift in US administration or global crises could derail the long-term roadmap. If the $600 billion figure feels staggering, that's precisely the point. It's not meant to be purely financial. It's psychological theatre, a signal to the world that Riyadh and Washington are rewriting their roles. The Saudi story is no longer one of oil fields. It's one of ambition, image, and influence through investment. The US story, meanwhile, is about capital magnetism, the ability to keep global wealth anchored in American soil even as multipolarity grows. And together, they tell a broader truth about the 2020s, that economic partnerships have replaced political alliances as the dominant instrument of global power. Where once world leaders drew battle lines, they now draw investment frameworks. If the partnership holds, and if even 2/3 of the $600 billion commitment materializes, the consequences could be profound. The US remains the world's capital of innovation, bolstered by foreign sovereign investment. Saudi Arabia cements its image as a global financial superallocator, with power measured in fund ownership rather than oil exports. The Middle East's geopolitical centre of gravity shifts from conflict to commerce, with economic diplomacy replacing military tension. A new class of hybrid corporations emerges, American-Saudi joint ventures spanning from defence to biotech. By 2035, the world could look back at that day in Riyadh as the moment when economic gravity shifted eastward, but still within America's orbit. In the end, the $600 billion deal isn't just about investment. It's about redefinition of alliances, of influence, and of identity. Saudi Arabia is no longer waiting to be seen as relevant. It's buying relevance outright. The United States, once the unrivaled global lender, is now willingly becoming the borrower of trust and capital from its former dependents. That inversion of roles tells us something fundamental about the 21st century, that money now moves faster than politics, and whoever controls investment flows, not just armies, controls the narrative of power. So, as the decade unfolds, watch where the Saudi billions go. They'll reveal not just economic opportunity, but the new coordinates of global authority, because the next world order won't be drawn in treaties or military maps. It'll be written in capital allocations, joint ventures, and digital infrastructure contracts. The quiet architecture of power that begins often with nothing more than a handshake in the desert.